Folks, thanks so much for tuning in to the Saturday edition here as I give you some notions for the week ahead so you can be ahead of the conversation when you're discussing with friends and colleagues. And you're going to be amazed today at some of the things you're going to say, that's not going to be happening. You're talking about next week. Yes, it is. Everything from gas and oil prices to an amazing new area where women are seeing to have an increase in activity. Stay tuned for that right here, right now on this coming week, especially on Tuesday. You're going to see a lot of economic stuff coming out around the world that's going to have a determination on governments making bets on inflation. That's going to affect the cost of your groceries. It's also going to affect the cost of you borrowing money. So the CPI, which is called the Consumer Price Index, that's the amount of money that consumers are paying for a pre-identified, they call it a basket of goods, a basket of products. And in the US, the Federal Reserve that sets these interest rates is going to be taking a very close look at what the reports are coming out. Kevin Warsh is the head of the Federal Reserve, and people are going to be watching, investors are going to be watching, because if he says inflation is getting out of control in the US, that means higher interest rates. That means everything costing more. So watch that as we get the earnings out of Wall Street and coming up to the session. Some people have said, asked me a couple of comments, why is it called Wall Street? I lived in New York for a while, but anybody can Google this, but it'll save you going to chat to find out about that, as all these different companies now are coming out with their earnings report. So it's not just the CPI, but it's going to be companies coming out with their earnings. Did they make the earnings that they said they were going to? Are they doing better? Are they doing worse? But Wall Street, that was built way back in the 1600s. And actually, it was a Dutch colony that had first arrived there in New York Harbor. It wasn't called New York at the time. And they built it, and it was protection against, of course, the British, and also against First Nations groups. And so they built that, but very interesting. And they called the area right there, they called it New Amsterdam, not New York, of course, because New York was not there yet. The wall itself was about 12 feet high, about a half a mile long. And so because there was protection there, the various merchants would start gathering at the wall because it was safe. And then a street developed where everybody started setting up their shops and their stores, and that, of course, became Wall Street. But then in 1664, along come the British, and they said to the Dutch, either give up and let us take over, or we're going to come in and kill you all. So pretty persuasive there by the Brits. The Dutch surrendered. The Brits took it over. They changed it from New Amsterdam, we'll have none of that, thank you very much, to New York, drawing from a UK name. And there you go. The wall, came down eventually, but the street remains. Well, watch for Bank of Canada. They're going to be coming out with what they say is going to be the interest rate. So again, a high interest rate will indicate a more sluggish economy, and that's why people are watching that. And they put a lot of focus on what's called the debt to GDP ratio of a country. That determines the health of an economy. So GDP really stands for gross domestic products. When you're talking to your friends and they say GDP, you can say, oh yeah, the gross domestic product. I know what that is. And basically what that is, it's the total amount of money that is made in a country, let's say in a year. Everything that's made, everything that's built, everything that is sold, that's the gross domestic product. Now, you can have a large country, the top five actually GDPs in the world are the US is still number one, China, Germany, Japan, and India, because in the case of somewhere like India, just a massive population. So you can have huge numbers of people, but each one making not that much money during the year. But because you got a billion people, let's say, if you have a billion people making $1, that's $1 billion GDP. What really measures the wealth of a country is the GDP. That's the total amount of money divided by how many citizens. That's why some of these countries like US has a very high gross domestic product, and the ratio then of citizens to gross domestic product is actually pretty high. Because if they've got, pick a number, 380 million and a huge amount of revenue that's made in a year, and then you compare that with a country like India, which can have a lot of revenue being made in a year, but way more citizens. So the individual amount, the gross domestic product per citizen, if you have lower citizens, is higher. And so a wealthier country has a better GDP to citizen ratio. Then the other concern is the GDP debt ratio. So as governments everywhere continue to spend money, and remember what I said is the single greatest cause of inflation. Okay, remember it is what? Governments increasing spending with borrowed money is the single greatest factor. So when your prime minister or your president or whoever says it's the Iranian war, okay, that does have some effect. Or it's the price of fuel, yes, that has some effect. But what politicians love to distract you from, to get your eye off the ball, every time a politician, I'll just say this, not just till I'm blue in the face, but till I'm white in the face, every time a politician announces new spending, and it's done with borrowed money, you know that the price of that you're going to pay for groceries is going up. So don't just jump on the grocers. Listen to those announcements carefully. Your politician wants to get your votes, announces new spending. It's going to be tougher for you to buy eggs, bread, and other stuff. So we're watching. The GDP numbers are going to be coming out. Trump has announced an end to the so-called truce or the ceasefire or the memorandum of understanding that was signed. He says he's got 1,000 missiles that are ready to go right now because Iran fired on some ships in the Strait of Hormuz after they promised they wouldn't. So he's ready, as he says, and as they're saying, to rain hell down on Iran. But here's where it gets interesting, because part of the Iranian government has come back and saying, no, 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 it was a mistake. That was just a small rogue group of our soldiers and sailors that fired those. We're sorry that those missiles got fired. But Iran always plays this game. They get one leader to say one thing, they get another leader to say something else. And so at the same time as they're saying, oops, sorry, forgive us for accidentally shooting at those ships, here we have Majtaba Khamenei coming out at following the funeral, one of the longest funerals ever of the Ayatollah Khamenei, and saying, we will avenge. It's going to be avenge and revenge. So don't look for things settling down there, but I will predict, watch in the week ahead, I am going to predict there's going to be an increase of missile firings and attacks from the U.S. side. Well, between Canada and U.S., there's that wonderful bridge called the Gordie Howe Bridge, which we want to see opened, and we've talked about it a lot. It was built mainly with Canadian money, but the deal is that the Canadian side then will be able to extract the majority of tolls from that, and that until that money is repaid. And Trump said he's not going to allow it to go ahead. It's going to go ahead now, that bridge opening up July 27th. So this, along with the present bridge that's already there, these bridges will allow for more product to flow across the border at a lower price, is the hope. So that should help to keep the cost of products down. We're going to see an amazing report has come out. It's not just a report, but it's actually almost like a book. And brace yourself, it's called Spermageddon. Spermageddon. It's written by Shauna Swan. And what she is talking about is the apparent, she's saying apparent, the decrease in quality of the male side of the equation here. And they are looking for the reasons for this. Now, this is a meta study that's done by medical communities across and around the world. They say there's a decrease in the quality of the male product. And of course, the environmentalists are jumping in and say, there, we told you it's all because of the environment. And in fact, many reports are coming out saying it is not. The reason a report like this gets such attention is because governments are finally starting to talk about the declining birth rates in almost all Western countries. Really shocking decline in birth rates, and that's going to be a huge factor. It is right now for the number of people. Usually over this last couple of centuries, what we've seen is a growing number of people being born, and therefore that growing number of people working are able to take care of the people who are aging out and eventually dying. And when that gets flipped around and you don't have enough people working to support your economy and to support people who are no longer working, you've got a disaster on your hand. This is a disaster in the making. And so you get reports like this coming out that really gathers and garners interest. And you get governments stepping up saying they're going to put a lot more money into in vitro fertilization. That becomes and actually becomes an election issue. The Swedish prime minister in Sweden right now, preparing for their elections. That's actually one of the key points of their election is they're going to put all kinds of money and availability of, because it's an expensive process for couples, availability of IVF treatments, etc., for couples. There are other reports now that the first one has triggered, and they're saying that it's actually a delay in family formation, more people putting off marriage. Then there's other factors. For instance, if a woman took birth control in her earlier years biologically, in the productive years, that can have an effect in terms of birth rate, and it's really not the environment so much. And corresponding with that, watch for a report coming out this week. It's a meta-analysis done across all countries talking about the drop, not a birth rate here, but drop in the quality of the sperm product and its potency. And what they're saying and pointing out there is in fact, that drop has not occurred in the US as they've done this meta-analysis around the world. It has not dropped in the US, so tough to blame the environmental factors. But watch for that discussion. That's going to be a big and continuing discussion emerging in the week ahead. The Washington Post has stories, as a couple of other outlets do, as they looked at over the July 4th weekend and the happenings over the weekend in the US. Teen takeovers are really becoming a serious issue. Teen takeovers, and they reference the one that took place over the weekend, the July 4th holidays, 4,000 teens showing up and causing a lot of damage, even some people getting shot. And then you flip to the other side of the US, over to Newport Beach in California, over 400 arrests, all of teenagers. And authorities are finding that, in fact, the curfews are not working that well. So obviously this is a combination of issues. It's a combination of parents not impressing upon their teenage kids that this is wrong, that this is inappropriate. Number of factors kicking in there, and we'll see if this trend continues. Also, people are reporting and saying for people who are certainly of the age of majority, if they're over 18, they need to be charged, and if found guilty, they should be reminded, and this should be done beforehand, that if you're found guilty of criminal charges, you are never allowed, you're going to never be able to cross, or be very difficult to get permission to cross a border into another country. So you have youth who are wanting to be a part of the new, what they call, well, it's a sort of early retirement among young people. And young people taking off a year or 2 years, or going traveling or sailing. All of these combined factors are going to be impacted if you've got a criminal record. So you want to be careful about that. Disturbing report coming out. You're going to see this coming up this week in terms of the important charges, the importance of these charges being laid. If it's not happening, and this has to do with illegal immigration too, you can use that to keep the rates down on illegal immigrants coming into the country. And countries that are not doing that are experiencing increasing levels of social unrest, very severe social unrest. You see it now on the internet, the constant stream of postings about violence, the violent activities that are happening on the streets of many countries. So the importance of people, if they do break the law, being charged, and if found guilty, reminding them beforehand that this is serious business on their lifestyle, and can really affect, the lifestyle of people who want to travel as they get into their 20s. Well, the World Cup, as it continues to go along, a couple of you're going to see coming up this week. Again, we've seen a top player, Jaril Quansah from the UK, banned for 2 games, 2-game ban, and that was in the game against UK against Mexico. And also, of course, the one that got a lot of attention of Folarin Balogun getting a ban, and then the US president intervening. Just again, I've talked a little bit about this, but a word to the wise at FIFA and the World Cup, when you're showing these games, when these games are played in Canada, in the US, and somewhat in Australia, there is not a lot of sympathy for players rolling around on the ground looking like they've just been shot or looking like they had a limb amputated. And then as soon as the card comes out or a free kick is given, that player leaps up miraculously healed by the divine and begins running around the field. The two game ban is very severe for UK. And they did the slow motions. And they said, well, when he slid into him, his cleats were in the upward position. Have you watched a baseball game lately, folks? And now there are rules in baseball to try and curtail that, but it's a regular activity. And hitting somebody too hard, there is just zero sympathy among North American fans who daily, when they're watching hockey, when they're watching football, are watching large men colliding with each other at very high speeds, crashing off of boards, rolling around on the ice, getting hit at tremendous force and bouncing up, sometimes bleeding, sometimes teeth knocked out, and getting right back into the game. So, I don't know. They're going to have to resolve this at FIFA. They're going to have to resolve this internationally. It's becoming a meme in itself. It's becoming a point of ridicule. And I'm just a word to the wise that the FIFA people and the World Cup people and international football, get your act together. The rolling around on the field does not impress American fans and Canadian fans at all. So with the price, as I've indicated to you, the price of diesel, the price of West Texas Intermediate, and the price of Brent continues to stay fairly low, then why is diesel going out? Well, Russia has made a major announcement. So watch for this in next week. Watch for the price of diesel going up because they are banning all of the export of their own diesel. They export huge amounts of diesel, which helps to keep the price down in other countries. But now with their war effort, they're worrying about running out of their own diesel, and they're banning that export. That's a huge amount of export off the grid, and it's going to affect prices for oil, especially on diesel. There's also been some concern, some of the refineries that are having some difficulties and having to do some retrofitting. But diesel, remember, that's the entire long haul trucking industry, that's the rail industry, farm implements, ships, all using diesel. So a bit of an issue coming there. Well, if you want to have something to worry about in terms of being scared, monster movies are really just sweeping the internet. And the thing is about a couple of these monster movies, like Obsession is one of them, like Backrooms, this genre. I mean, monster and horror has always been there, but the ability now for these movies to be able to be created fairly inexpensively, and all it goes now to is the creatives and the people with the huge amount, whether it's AI technology and other things. These really horrifying horror movies can be created relatively inexpensively and getting huge amounts of views or showing up in theaters. And so what's happening now is the major companies, which is actually kind of fun to see, out of Hollywood, they're trying to rush to these young creators and buy the images off them and pay huge prices. So again, AI showing everybody getting wealthier. In fact, there's a great story about the creator of Siren Head. That's a monster, actually, and it's not even a ghostly thing. It's actually a tower with sirens on it, and it's called Siren Head, and apparently really, really scary stuff. Well, the robotics breakthrough continues. AI capabilities and wonder stories continue. The first surgeries now being done by humanoid robots, and it's happened at the University of California, San Diego, and two separate surgeries, one done by one humanoid robot and the other done by two humanoid robots, and done completely successfully. And people are going, oh no, this is terrible. Well, when you think about the fact that the robots will not make mechanical mistakes, or the possibility they make a mistake is much lower than a surgeon making a mistake. Their hands don't tremble, their hands don't wiggle at the wrong time. And watch for this to continue, robots doing the surgery for you. Bloomberg's reporting that those of you who know what Love Island is all about, the show obviously about love and about who's going to get hooked up with who, just going through the roof in terms of viewership. 2.3 billion viewer minutes in its first 2 weeks of the last show. And partly this is a factor of the shows come out very regularly and almost daily. You have people on TikTok making a lot of money just talking about the shows and taking bets. So gambling, as you know, with the gambling apps that are out there, you can bet on everything. So gambling on the shows and who's going to get hooked up with who or who's going to break up has really increased. And here's the interesting thing: two-thirds of the gamblers on the show Love Island, and it's radically increasing, two-thirds of those brand new gamblers, this is people who are making a first trade ever, even in the stock market, two-thirds are women. Women increasingly getting into the gambling and also using the betting market. So we'll see where that continues to go. Wall Street Journal and also in Australia, combining with a publication there called The Age, are talking about a phenomenon among Gen Zs in terms of, yes, they've moved on or they're still doing thrifting, but the average price of certain types of IKEA furniture, used IKEA furniture, certainly on one of the main apps is called Cherish. I guess that's chair, like a chair, not to chair somebody. Average price of a piece of furniture there is $1,000. A couple of examples: the IKEA 1971 chair called the Impala, if any of you remember that. It's just a lounge chair, and adjusting for inflation, the cost of that would be, say, in today's dollars, $350. Now it's on Cherish at $12,000 and selling. A pair of the PS 2012 metal chairs, they're just straight metal chairs, nothing too elaborate about them, but they've got, of course, that sleek IKEA design. They were selling for $339 when they first came out. They're now, you can buy them for $3,000. The very interesting that uh, Gen Z increasingly, buying hugely expensive items like this. And we've talked about it before, also eating out or buying out and buying, whether it's smoothies or meals or all kinds of fancy meals and other things, and yet saying they can't afford a down payment on a house. Folks, take a look at your spending. Maybe you want to look at what parents and grandparents did in terms of saving dollars to get that first down payment to put it on a house. It is possible. I talked about that early in the week. Well, freelance writer Noah Kirsch is talking about this whole move, and it's really related to Charlie Kirk since his assassination, from reverence to satire and memes about Charlie Kirk's death and the assassination, and what happened with the original outpouring of sympathy and grief. Then some people started putting the memes out there and doing satire on that. That triggered a giant amount of criticisms of anybody who would dare to, uh, put out satire on somebody's death, and there's good reason for that kind of criticizing. But when you go into overboard criticizing on the internet, you're going to get pushback and people even more creating things to make people angry. So the because of this capacity on the internet to go to satire and to go to react from criticism, you're seeing these pretty nasty stuff coming out, not just on Charlie Kirk, but when people die, there is immediately the satire and the reaction, and not a good thing, not a healthy thing. People violently being killed, that's a dangerous thing in society, especially when it's young people who are mocking and laughing at it. Maybe we could take a little page out of the book of St. Benedict, because it is St. Benedict Day for those people who celebrate and honor certain saints on certain days. And of course, St. Benedict started the Benedictine order of monasteries and fasting and praying. And his the two words that really are his motto, and the motto for St. Benedict Day are ora et labora. Ora et labora, and that's ora, O-R-A. It actually means to pray strongly, and labora, work. And that was what St. Benedict, that's what Benedict said. Folks, start your day with prayer and then get to work. And you have far better outcomes in society than not thinking of and meditating on the divine, and not working but sitting around on the internet all day. Ora et labora. Share it with your friends. They'll think you're a genius. Thanks for tuning in. See you on Monday.